Hello YouTube. Today we're going to be continuing our exploration of e4, e5, and we're going to be continuing to look at the four knights. And today we're going to be exclusively focusing on the very scary Belgrade Gambit, which happens after d4, e takes d4, and then the move knight to d5. Now before we go any further, if you like this kind of content and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. That's your bell icon. So, the Belgrade Gambit is a very frightening weapon. White sacrifices material, and in exchange for that sacrificed material, he's going to get very aggressively placed pieces in Black's position. There are several ways that Black can deal with the Belgrade Gambit. You can accept it, and there are actually a couple of different acceptable ways that you can decline the Gambit. Now, the move that I'm going to show first, and the move that I actually recommend, is just going ahead and accepting that Gambit. I don't think there's any problem with accepting this Gambit, and that accepting of the Gambit leads to a very long forcing continuation. Now, when I was younger, I felt like accepting the Gambit was actually easier than declining the Gambit, and I know that sounds counterintuitive, but for me, the long forcing moves were easier for me to find than some of the moves that you have to find when you decline the Gambit. So here, I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if you accept this Gambit with knight takes e4, they're going to go ahead and they're going to play queen e2. So queen e2 is extremely forcing because we are creating this pin against this knight and against this king, and there are precious little ways to defend this knight. We can't play queen e7, for example. So f5 is a pretty simple move to find. We play f5 or we lose a whole knight, so it's a pretty easy decision. So that knight to g5 gets played, and now we're ratcheting up the pressure on this knight. Now again, for me, this is an easy move to find, this next move, because seemingly there's no way to defend this knight. So what we have to do is we have to counterattack. We have to counterattack against this queen on e2, and there's only one way to do that, because otherwise they're just going to play knight takes e4 and queen takes e4, and we're losing. So what we do is we play d3. We push this pawn and we play d3. We give this pawn back, and after cd3 we're going to play this knight to the d4 square, attacking this queen. Notice that white cannot maintain this pin with a move like queen e3 because we would have knight c2 winning the queen. So instead they're going to move the queen away with tempo. They're going to play check, and then after g6, queen h4, white is going to have a super strong attacking position with his pieces. Now you notice I've highlighted this idea, knight to c2, knight to a1. This is something that Black actually cannot play. And not only can't he play it here, he can't play it next move, and probably can't play it the move after that. White's attacking position is deceptively strong. White has a bunch of pieces in Black's camp, and more importantly, Black has very little cover around his king right now. Black has made a lot of pawn moves around his king, and this makes Black's position especially dangerous. He actually needs to keep these knights close to his king so that he can defend against these dangerous threats. So if, for example, Black goes for this exchange, like if he plays knight to c2 check, king to d1, knight takes rook, Black's position is actually completely losing. All White would have to do is play e takes d5, and now White is going to be attacking with four things in this position. And we actually don't have a great move here, so probably best is to try to kick away one of these attackers, and then, unfortunately, White can just ignore that because he's got a lot of attacking pieces. He can play e takes f5, pawn takes, and then after queen d4 hitting the rook on h8, we do not have a move that doesn't lose. Our rook is hanging, and when we move the rook, the pawn goes to f6, and now the threat is pawn to f7, and that's pretty much game over. We can try rook g7. That's about all we can try, and that move, as you can see, that move's pretty ridiculous. We're just going to take it, and we're going to take the bishop, and not only are we down material here, we are actually down material. After winning the rook on a1, we're actually down. Even if we get this knight out, we're still down. But White is also threatening checkmate in 1, so we just have nothing here. This is game over, this is done. So White would be winning there. So that's why we can't play knight c2, but we also can't play it a move later. So if we play the move, say pawn to c6, and then they play e captures d5, we've actually reached an identical position by transposition. So here, if we play knight to c2, king here takes, this position is absolutely identical to the last one. There are no changes here, so we can't play it on the next move either. So instead of knight c2, what we have to do is we have to play c takes d5, and then they have two options here. They can play e captures f5 or e captures d5. Now, objectively, the more dangerous of those two is e captures f5. E captures d5 is less dangerous, but after e captures d5, important to note, we still cannot play knight c2 check. We can never play this move. If we were to play knight to c2 check here, king d1, knight takes a1, we are still losing after queen to d4, although it is a little different, because you notice there is no f6, but guess what? We have d6, and d6 is just as deadly. We're threatening queen to e5, and we're also going to just bring this bishop out, and the rook is going to be threatening to come in at some point. So a finishing continuation might look something like this. This bishop e7 is forced, and then we would develop the bishop, we would play queen g7, and then after bishop g5, the rook comes into e1. There is no other legal move here. Bishop e7, rook e7, queen e7, queen e7 is mate. So white is just completely winning, again, if we go for this rook. So just, this is the main thing to remember when you accept the Belgrade Gambit. Just do not go for this rook. Do not go for it under any circumstances. You know, you have to push white's pieces back and out of your position. You have to get some development before you can go rook hunting. So c takes d5 against e takes d5. The best move is to cover those dark squares and get some development. You need to play bishop to g7, and that way you are effectively preventing the move queen to d4. So at this point, they can just develop with bishop c4. Again, they're trying to tempt us into playing a move like knight c2, where we would once again be completely losing with the king going here and the rook coming in. There's just too much stuff attacking our king. But here we can play h6, attacking this piece, and there is no good move here for white. White cannot attack our king fast enough. He can't castle and magically teleport his rook to e1 in the same move, and because of this, this position isn't just advantage black. This position is decisive advantage black. Black is winning a piece here. White doesn't have a good move. White can't retreat the knight. If knight f3, we're going to play knight takes f3, gf3, queen h4 is winning a whole queen. And at that point, white doesn't have enough attacking pieces. We can take a whole queen. We just can't take this rook. Okay, so h6 is decisive advantage black, so we're doing pretty good there. And that is why after c takes d5, white should be playing e takes f5. This is a much better move. And then, again, black is not going to play knight to c2. Don't have time. And it's going to, again, be a direct transposition into the queen d4, f6 lines. We're going to have to play knight takes f5, bringing this knight back to defend, and then an example of what could happen after this would be queen h3, bishop e7, g4, bishop g5 takes, and then another simple developing move, we play d6, and this position in theory is supposed to be slight edge black. Black has an extra couple of center pawns in this position, and black has survived the worst of whatever white can throw at him. He's not going to get mated with just one queen in play. So black has survived the attack, and he's a couple of doubled isolated center pawns to the good. So this is supposed to be advantage black. So that's basically how we accept the gambit, and as far as I know, no major improvements have ever been found in this line. So you should be able to accept this gambit, and you should be able to get an advantage with black. According to theory right now, worst case scenario is slight edge black in that last line that I showed, and there's several other lines that lead to major advantage black, or decisive advantage black. But of course, there's a lot of pitfalls in there, where if you just slip up one time and you accidentally take something you're not supposed to take, you are going to be completely losing. And of course, that's the appeal for playing the Belgrade Gambit with white. So if you don't want to dive into these complications, there are a couple ways that you can decline. You can decline with either bishop to e7, or you can decline with knight b4. Now, out of these two, knight b4 is probably one of the most interesting. Now, when I say interesting, I mean you're not giving up on the complications with knight to b4. You're actually creating some new ones. So with knight to b4, you're basically saying, hey, wouldn't you like to help me develop? You know, and of course, it would be great if white did help you develop, and he can help you develop by either taking your knight here, in which case you're taking back with your bishop with a tempo, or he can help you develop by taking your knight on f6. Because what you're doing is you're putting pressure on the d5 square, and you're saying, I'm just going to take twice on d5 if you don't do anything. So you're basically counterattacking against his counterattack. If he plays knight takes f6, you're going to play queen takes f6. And then after, say, bishop c4, you would play bishop c5. After castles, you would simply play d6 to prevent e5. And then after knight to g5, you would castle. Now, this was probably slight advantage black in Van der Weide versus Golod in the Netherlands in 1995. And that game actually ended up going very well for black. Golod did end up coming away with the full point with the black pieces in that game after a long, complicated game. So that's one way that we can decline, is we can play knight to b4, and then that's if they play knight f6. Now, white can go into even scarier complications in this position, though. He can say, okay, you played knight b4 to decline. I'm going to go ahead and call your bluff. I'm going to play knight takes d4. And now black, of course, can simply take that knight on d5, and he can take that pawn on d5. When he takes the pawn on d5, black is effectively up a pawn now, but the position gets very scary after, say, knight f5, knight e7, bishop g5, and as you can see, we're going to go into some sacrificial craziness here. Bishop g5, f6, white's actually going to sack, play queen h5 check, knight here, castles queenside, c6, bishop c4, d5, rook he1, king f7, and in theory, black is supposed to be okay here in spite of white having a very dangerous looking attack. Black was able to weather the storm in Andrade versus Asfora in Brazil in 2017, and black's position is supposed to be acceptable, but of course this is a very dangerous looking attacking position for white, and it is something that we may or may not want to go into with the black pieces. But again, this is supposed to be advantage black. This is supposed to be okay. So the other way that we can decline, if we just want to avoid all the complications, if we don't want to play the crazy complications of the Belgrade Gambit and we don't want to accept it, and we don't want to play the crazy complications of declining it with knight b4, we can just always decline it in a really safe way. We can play the move bishop to e7. Now, the one thing I don't like about this move is this position is probably, out of all the positions we've looked at, this is the one that's going to be slight advantage white. So after bishop e7, bishop f4, d6, knight takes d4, we're going to go ahead and castle. Knight b5, this forces knight takes d5, e takes d5. What black is basically playing here is black is playing a Philidor defense with the black pieces. And if white wants to, white can go into this forcing continuation, and he can basically force black to be down a pawn in this position. He doesn't have much of a choice. So there was a game that was played between Svidler and Mirosevic that continued a6, dc6, takes, bishop g5, takes and takes, and Mirosevic was down a pawn here, but he had a lot of activity for that pawn. So after queen g4, queen e7, king d2, bishop f6, he has a lot of activity for the pawn, and it should actually compensate for a pawn in this position. And it did. He managed to play some active chess. He managed to play some chess that Mirosevic was actually kind of famous for, some aggressive sacrificial chess. He played amazing-looking rook b2 in this position, which worked out for him after queen b2, bishop to c3, and a bunch of exchanges took place here, which effectively led to an opposite colored bishop endgame, which he was eventually able to turn into a draw after a further 16 moves or so. So anyways, those are your options against the Belgrade Gambit. You can accept this gambit, and that is my primary recommendation against the Belgrade Gambit. My primary recommendation is just go ahead and accept it. Go into these forcing lines. Theory holds right now that this is supposed to be slight advantage black. Now, there's a little bit of scariness here, and of course there's always the risk that somebody's come up with something new and exciting that can make this position interesting again. But right now, theory holds that this should be slight advantage black if everything is played correctly. So I do recommend capturing this pawn with knight takes e4. If you just want to play a declined variation that creates a different type of complication, you can play knight to b4. But if you just want to play something that's completely safe and are willing to accept a position where black is slightly worse, then the move for you here is going to be to decline with the move bishop to e7. So anyways, I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.